All right, the President of the United States, very proud, rightfully so, in pointing out the tremendous growth that the United States economy experienced over the course of the second quarter, 4.1%. It is the most significant GDP growth rate in quite some time, since 2013,
yeah, about
right?
that.
And so that is something that he and the members of his economic team are very proud of. There's people on social media that are adding me and saying, we as reporters should be more laudatory towards the president for this accomplishment.
It is a tremendous accomplishment, and the president should let us know about it. I think that we also want to put it in context too, and that's
exactly
why we ask about how long is this sustainable, what are we going to see for the rest of the year. But this is great news.
This is great news for the president, and it's something that he has talked about for quite some time, and it's something that he campaigned on, and which is he had talked oftentimes on the campaign trail about increasing the GDP numbers. Look, I spent 20 years on Wall Street. I can tell you that anytime you can point to a win, it's great. But the question becomes, for example, in my situation, for our clients, is it sustainable? And you have to look at things over the course of an extended period of time. And a 3-month blip on the economic calendar does not make an economy. So we're going to be obviously watching over the course of the next couple of months, the next couple of quarters, to see if this number is sustainable. The president believes that it is, and the members of his economic council also believe that these numbers are sustainable. They're much smarter than I am, so perhaps they're right. The thing is, you're looking at the stock market right now, the market reacting sort of sideways about this.
Right.
I can tell you that the Dow Jones is up slightly, but we've noticed that the S&P is down. And primarily that is because there's been some volatility in the tech sector. Twitter is down significantly.
And energy, I think, too.
Energy is also taking a hit, as has Facebook. Facebook is tremendous. It's been crushed over the last couple of days, and so that's part of the reason why we've seen some of the volatility in the S&P and the Nasdaq. The question, of course, becomes as we look forward, and we spoke to Katya, Dmitrieva, who works at Bloomberg, and we talked to her and we asked her questions about how this can be sustainable over the course of the next couple of quarters. And the question, it's not a definite, but the question that everybody has is, because that some folks have stockpiled some of the goods that the president has imposed tariffs on,
particularly soybeans,
and is that why we've seen at least a 1-point increase in the GDP? We won't know until we can look at the next quarter and the one after that.
So we have Major Garrett standing by. He is the CBS News chief White House correspondent. Major, you listened to what the president had to say. What was your takeaway?
Well, clearly the president is not only excited about this economic news, but believes it is economic vindication for political decisions, most of them made in the first year of his presidency. One, to take a very aggressive deregulatory approach to what the Obama administration put in its last 2 years in office, and cajole and lobby and work with Republicans in Congress to pass a large corporate tax decrease, a large personal income tax decrease, and put reforms within the system, both of which the president says is responsible directly for this very strong, it can't be characterized as any other thing than that, very strong second quarter GDP number. And the president said, look, a strong U.S. economy is the time to assert U.S. economic dominance when it comes to trade. This White House believes that a strong U.S. economy is in exactly the right and most advantageous position to carry this trade argument to Europe and to Asia. And the president also took pains to note a small decrease, but a noticeable decrease, $50 billion in the trade deficit. And it is his belief that this trade confrontation will ultimately be resolved, and the time to wage that confrontation is when the U.S. economy is growing and can be resilient and can take what he would characterize, and most of his economic advisors that I've spoken to characterize as momentary confrontations over trade that are not going to last for the long term, but are going to be somewhat disruptive, but in the end accrue more to the benefit of U.S. manufacturers, farmers, and the like. And the time to do that, they argue, is when the economy is robust. Well, clearly these numbers suggest a robust economy. We will see if the president's calculus about trade proves to be correct, but I guarantee you his economic team believes now is the time to wage this fight, and they intend to wage it.
Yeah, and that's a great point to make, Major. We can dissect the numbers and we can talk about what those numbers will look like in the next quarter and the quarters after that. But your point is that the U.S. economy is doing better than it did in years previous. And that is, according to the president, a testament to not only the policies that he's put into place. He talked about deregulation. He talked about the tax cuts, but also the team that he has in place. He feels very strongly that he's got some of the best and brightest there.
And one thing to keep in mind, and I think the most important, or one of the most important statements made came right at the end, when the chairman of the National Economic Council, Larry Kudlow, said, these are not one-time numbers. These numbers and the growth that they represent are sustainable for as far as the eye can see, or very deep into the future. All right. That's the White House saying this is not a sugar high. This is not an economic surge that can't be sustained. That is now going to be one of the measuring sticks to evaluate this administration between now and 2020. Because I have talked to some economists who do look at these numbers and say, yes, they're very strong. The Federal Reserve has said they're so strong that interest rates can be raised twice more this calendar year and not deal a destabilizing blow to the economy. It's that resilient. That's fine. But there are aspects of the economic data that are, to other economists, somewhat worrisome. The federal deficit keeps rising. It's going to be $1 trillion this year in all likelihood, or very close to it, and possibly $1 trillion for many, many years in the future, built into the system. That means higher debt service. That means larger national debt. That means government borrowing crowding out private investment borrowing. These two things could become problematic in the not too distant future. And going back to the trade issue, yes, there is tremendous confidence that this president is driving that argument, will force allies and adversaries to trade differently with the United States. But if this becomes a tariff war and U.S. markets shrink as a result of that, that could have a negative effect on economic growth and undermine these numbers. So when Larry Kudlow says on behalf of the president, we're going to have this great economy for a great deal of time in the future, that's now a promise. The promises made during the campaign have largely been fulfilled. Now they have established a new benchmark to measure this economy and its future performance.
And Major, if we are able to take away all of the things that have happened over the course of this week that really matter to Americans, if you take away the special counsel investigation, you take away Michael Cohen, you take away all the noise around Helsinki, the president has had actually a very good week. He literally kissed and made up with the European Union. He's able to say, look, the deal that I hammered out with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un has resulted in something tangible. American remains are coming home. And today he can talk about these strong GDP numbers. So if you had to assess the president's week and take away all that stuff, which I know you really can't, but just looking at some of the tangible benefits that most Americans across this country are going to be able to say, well, actually, I can see the results of President Trump's policies and his actions. It is a good week for President Trump.
Well, let's start with the European Union. Many Trump supporters would say, yes, the president called the question. He made noise, and the European Union responded. Now, we don't know the ultimate result of those conversations, but things have stepped back from an all-out trade war. And if they're resolved to the satisfaction of both parties, then the president, by driving that hard bargain, will have succeeded, and that will be a victory. No one in America will in any way contest that it's not important and not historically meaningful to have remains from the Korean War returned to the United States. Of course it's meaningful. That's a beginning step. It doesn't address promises from the North Korean regime on denuclearization, but it is a confidence-building maneuver, not an unimportant one. It had some hiccups, it had some missed meetings and some miscommunications, but it appears to be moving in a direction of progress. Much more work has to be done. That's not my assessment. That's the assessment of the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee just that earlier this week. There's a long way to go. I'm not overselling what we've accomplished on denuclearization. And on the fundamentals of the economy, the president will say, and has said, this is what I promised in the campaign. This is what I delivered with Republicans in Congress last year. Here are the results. Judge for yourself. And he is perfectly willing to be judged on these results.
All right, Major Garrett for us at the White House. Major.